Who were you before you lost your wild self?
That's what we're helping you explore on the Tend Her Wild podcast.
Through questions and tools around how best to listen to your inner voice,
rewild ourselves, and live the most authentic life where we thrive instead of survive.
I'm Betsy.
And I'm Kate.
And we're so glad you've joined us for this episode.
Hello, Tend Her Wild podcast listeners. In today's episode, we are excited to have a special guest here with us today, Angie Chaplin. Welcome, Angie.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here with you.
We are so thrilled to have you.
We were just saying it's so nice to be in studio with you and your energy already. We've already been talking and we're like, we have to stop. We have to save this for the podcast.
Yes. Oh, but wait, there's more.
Okay, good.
So let me share with our listeners a little bit about you, Angie. You're an internationally respected speaker, consultant, and educator with 30 years of expertise in leadership and organizational development. Your mastery of personal development in leadership has earned esteemed recognition, and most recently, you were a nominee for an Iowa Character Award. Congratulations on that.
You.
With an entrepreneurial spirit and a heart for social good, Angie is the owner of Mindful Leadership LLC and co-founder of Brave Leadership, an emerging nonprofit unlocking leadership potential within health and human services. Speaking openly about her mental and behavioral health journeys, Angie is also a credentialed mindfulness teacher and a trained peer recovery coach. Her courageous story epitomizes her values of integrity, curiosity, clarity, connection, and love. And she serves as a beacon of authenticity for many, emphasizing the alignment of professional values and practiced behaviors. Academically grounded in research-based programs, Angie's educational foundation is rooted in a master's degree from Seton Hall University and a bachelor's degree from Buena Vista University. So welcome, Angie.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Yay. Really happy to have you here.
Thank you.
We already have been talking about your journey, and I was saying that I think this is one that, so many people are going to resonate with. So thanks for being here.
Yes.
So you know where we start.
I
start
do.
in that first decade,
Right.
And all, so much evolves in those first 10 years. But, what were some key things that you remember that you also sort of understand how it is who you are now? Like
Yes.
the things that the through line, we might say.
Right. As I think back, that was a while ago now, but I remember being a voracious reader. I was an early reader. I remember my mom saying that I taught myself to read by watching Sesame Street. And so I could read before I entered kindergarten, and then had the benefit of additional tutors and supports along the way. But that craving for knowledge or connection really has been a byline as I think about it, and understanding the world to some degree through other people's stories, I think became safer as I grew up, right? Because you could learn somewhat vicariously through even fiction stories of how, characters evolved and made changes and survived. And some were silly and some were strong and some were soft. And even if I didn't have the language to understand that back then, I think that just building an early capacity for awareness definitely helped serve me later in life. And I think like many my age or of that generation, we never talked about emotions, right? And perhaps that was what I was able to better understand through books or through stories. Most people that have grown up, in the 70s and 80s, we just didn't talk about stuff like emotional intelligence.
No.
Or, nervous system regulation,
Right.
or some of the essential life skills that we need. We weren't talking about it. We weren't taught in school. And it's definitely become an eye-opener just as I continue to grow through my journey and serve as to lead by example for my young, not so young anymore, but my sons and the people that I'm blessed to have in my life. So I think just that capacity for awareness and growth and knowledge, that hunger for knowing and learning and growing.
You were a seeker.
A seeker, yes.
Yeah.
I still am a seeker.
I see that in you.
And I'm curious, were you an emotional child? Because you're talking about how you weren't given a lot of outlets to express emotion. And so that was just sort of tamped down. But I'm curious, you were learning through stories. 'Cause
Right.
clearly there's emotion and, you see that in all these different stories. Even on Sesame Street, there's emotion.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Were you an emotional child, or again, was that tamped down so early that you?
From what I remember, and I'll have to dig a little bit deeper on that question. Yes, I would say I was an emotional child. I would say that I did not handle emotions well. I probably did. I did a lot of writing. I wrote a lot of poetry in my younger years. And perhaps that was an outlet for me. I was musical. So I played, I was artistic in musical abilities, instrumental music. I did a lot of acting. I was active in speech and drama. And so I think those were the healthy ways of being able to adopt different characters or perform that were healthy. I think later in life, as things became, as life does, more complex and more complicated, I lost touch with some of those early skills and certainly did not seek out opportunities to learn new ones. And that would then lead to some situations that I couldn't reconnect with myself.
You grew up in a small town?
I grew up in a small town in Decorah in Northeast Iowa. Yes. And then I went to college in a small town in Storm Lake, Iowa, so Northwest. And I didn't really, I didn't pursue city life, I guess. I raised my family in Waverly, another small college town, now that I think about it. And then would begin kind of trying to break free, or so I thought, and moving to bigger cities. And that started in 2019 when I moved to Dubuque. And at that time, I was escaping. I truly was. My life had gotten really messy. I was right in the dark decade of alcohol becoming my primary coping skill, and thought, oh, I'll move by myself to somewhere I don't know anybody, but I'll have a job and it'll be good and I'll
fresh start.
Yeah, right. All the things that sounded great at the time and just further isolated me from myself, but also from any support systems that I might have otherwise been able to leverage. And that became a city of bittersweet recollection for me. It's a place where I hit multiple rock bottoms, and I've had several in my lifetime, but it's also a place where I gave myself a chance.
Yeah.
And that started my sobriety journey.
Yeah. And we want to get into the sobriety journey because I think it's such an important, powerful topic we all know someone,
right? Yes.
who struggles with alcohol abuse. And so we want to talk about this. And before we started the podcast today, you said something that I want to come back to. You said, I feel like I had a perception of myself as wild, and I was being wild by drinking and, these wild behaviors.
Yes.
And your realization of like, oh no, I was so detached from my real wild, which was my authenticity.
Absolutely.
So can you, and I don't know where to have you start. I'm just going to let you start about this, maybe rock bottom, and then how you moved to solutions and now who you are today.
Sure. And I'm going to start in 2010. That was when the trifecta of challenging circumstances in life started. It was the loss of a job that I loved and had, of course, identified with, had worked for a nonprofit for 10 years, and the position and the program that I was responsible for was eliminated. I had the death of a close friend, and my marriage started deteriorating. And the combination of those three significant life challenges, I did not know how to work through it. And that struggle became internal, and I felt stuck and didn't want to be here anymore. I had a suicide attempt and successfully worked through that. It was the first of many rock bottoms. And even though I remember bits and pieces of it, I remember coming on the other side or getting out of the psychiatric unit in the hospital and thinking, I'm not healed. But I didn't know what was available, right?
You knew something deeper was.
I knew something was
So you'd
still
been in for a period of time,
right,
but came out and had that awareness of like, oh, this didn't solve it.
Yeah, I felt, I guess, in air quotes, better, but I wasn't fixed. I wasn't, and I think I assumed that I'd come out of the hospital and I'd be fixed, right? All the broken things would be repaired.
And we love that idea in this culture of like, give me the fix, give me the medication, give me the one thing. If I go away for 5 days, if I take a move, if I, like that's a good vacation, whatever it is, like that's going to fix it. So that was a really key moment of like, oh, wow.
It was work to do.
There's something deeper here.
Yep. And so I shoved that down and ignored it and escaped in other ways. So that really would kick off the wild behaviors, the drinking, I had a foot injury and needed surgery. So then there was some struggles with opioids at that time. So it was really seeking a connection with something.
Yep.
My marriage was headed towards divorce. And so I didn't have that type of companionship. So would seek solutions in other individuals or validation from other individuals, and really just tried to fill a void inside myself that I didn't even know where to begin with.
Sure.
And
I had
kids.
2 young boys at that time. And so trying to fit into the traditional definition of good wife and perfect mom, those were all weighing heavily on me at the same time.
And so many women can relate to those terms right there. Good wife, good mom.
Right.
That's what we're reared to do. And when we somehow feel like we're off track, the guilt and the overwhelm is immense.
Shame.
Exactly. And that's really what became almost the end for me, was feeling that I'm not good at any of these things. I'm not doing life right because I don't know how to do it without numbing or escaping or allowing myself to heal.
Yeah. Did you have much of a support system at that time, or were you really pretty isolated?
Pretty isolated. I would talk to, after I came out of the psychiatric unit, I did do group therapy at the hospital, I think 3 times a week. And that was the first time that I heard a therapist mention, in relation to my relationship, emotional abuse. And I thought, nuh-uh, I deserve the way that I'm being treated. And she had an assessment and a worksheet, and I was in complete denial that I deserved love, that I was worthy of support, of encouragement, really of the love that I was seeking was really what I needed to give myself.
Self-love.
Yeah.
But did not know and did not have the tools to do that.
Yeah. So there's this empty hole that you realize is in you, and you have no idea how to fill it. And so you were filling, or you were using alcohol, which is so common.
Right.
And we don't even know that we're doing this because it's so acculturated. People accept it.
Yes.
And then can you take us on the path of what that led to?
Right.
Because clearly it's not a long-term solution.
Exactly. And my first hospitalization came at the end of 2018. And I had severe stomach aches. And what I would do And at that point, things started with a glass of wine to unwind at night, just like moms do, right? And then it would become bottles of wine. And it doesn't matter how much or what, it doesn't matter what alcohol you're drinking. When you drink enough of it, you're going to damage yourself. And I would suffer from hyponatremia, blood sodium dilution in my blood, and then acute pancreatitis. And so I was hospitalized for that, came out and certainly thought, oh, I'll just switch beverages. I'm sure the wine, that much wine isn't good to you, but yeah, we'll just switch to vodka or whiskey. And again, it doesn't matter what is in the glass. If you drink enough of it, you'll hurt yourself. Yeah. And that's what I continued to do. In 2019 is when I, quote, pulled the geographic and decided to move to Dubuque. Again, clean slate, right? I'm going to start over.
It's got to be the solution.
Yeah, none of this baggage is going to follow me there. And it just became too much. I, again, was isolated, had no support system, and would continue to drink myself almost to death.
Yeah.
And
did you know you were doing it? Or was there so much
that's
denial and
odd
disconnect?
because it took 5 hospitalizations for me to really
finally see it.
Understand that, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing.
Can I ask, I'm so curious about like our healthcare system. Like, were you in denial, or were medical people helping you see it? Because I'm so curious, as women, sometimes I feel like we're not getting what we need when we ask for help. And I'm curious whether when you'd go in, whether people were helping you see that.
When I would go in, the guilt and the shame was so heavy that it blinded me from anything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I will say that I didn't feel seen, but honestly, I don't want to put that on the healthcare system because I didn't know how to see myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you probably weren't even giving all the information necessarily,
right.
or.
Yes. And that's absolutely true. I remember holding back on how much I was actually drinking because I was so ashamed about it.
Yeah.
And so multiple hospitalizations, again, pancreas, kidney, liver, things were just deteriorating. And in February of 2020 was Super Bowl weekend, February 2nd. And I had been on a heavy drinking binge. I had lost my job in Dubuque. Again, poor performance, poor attendance. And I just kept trying to cope with everything with more and more alcohol. And, I think about that now and I think, wow, was I really so isolated that I didn't see any other solutions? But
yeah.
Well, and alcohol, it
clouds your brain.
Clouds you, it blurs you, it numbs you. And so to even have your intellectual capacity online, you probably weren't in your full mind.
Right. Right. And again, hindsight's always much clearer when we are able to view it through today's lens. But that was Super Bowl weekend. My parents came to watch the game with me, and I was shaking uncontrollably and was just unable to really stay present and stay coherent. And so they were staying overnight, and I remember going to bed and just not even knowing if I would live through the night and not even caring if I did or didn't.
Yeah.
So that morning, I stumbled out of bed and said something to my dad. I think I need to go somewhere. And I had tried to get dressed and was kind of like stumbling and falling over and had no balance and again, still shaking. And I was admitted to the hospital in critical condition and placed into intensive care. And at that point, I was drinking beer, and it was literally cases a day.
Yeah.
And that diluted the sodium in my blood to the point of severe consequences.
Wow.
And again, I don't remember a lot about that whole experience. I remember being strapped to the bed because I became agitated.
Sure.
And I was screaming obscenities at the nurses and trying to pull my IVs out.
You're probably going through withdrawal.
Yes, going through severe withdrawal. And I've worked, again, they were able to bring back a quality of health that no longer was critical. And I remembered as I was getting discharged from the hospital.
How long were you in?
I was in for 5 days.
Okay.
And I think it was intensive care for 3 days and then just continued monitoring after that. And as I was being discharged, a doctor, I don't know if it was a psychiatrist or just a medical professional, literally looked me in the eye and said, "You've got 2 choices. You can keep drinking and you will die." And he kind of explained that I had almost faced that during this hospitalization. And then he said, "Or you can choose to give yourself a chance at life."
Wow.
And I don't know his name. I know he was a man, and I wish I knew exactly who it was, but either it was just the right time, or the way he said it, or I was finally truly ready.
And your mind was probably a little clearer.
More clear than it had been probably in months.
So you could hear it.
Yes. And so because I had lost my job, I was unemployed. And when I was released from the hospital, I entered an outpatient treatment center at the hospital. And that consisted of group therapy. So I was doing, group work, and there weren't really solutions or tools. There was discussion oriented. And 40 days later, COVID hit. And so I had been doing everything in person. And when COVID struck, in those early days, nobody knew what was happening.
It was locked down, yeah.
And so I'm like, well, crap, now what do I do? And it was a tug back into myself at that point. It would have been so easy to start drinking again.
Yeah, and that's when everybody drinks so much.
Yes,
like alcohol
how we were
sales
coping with
skyrocketed.
isolation.
Absolutely.
So
You
for you
didn't.
to just have become sober and then to work through in loneliness, right?
Yes,
Isolation.
isolation, absolutely. And I dug deeper into self-leadership.
Wow.
And that had been my graduate work at Seton Hall was in leadership. My professional career in the nonprofit was in leadership. So I had leadership in my heart and in my soul. And it was really reconnecting with that voice and allowing myself to re-examine, if I'm not leading myself, how can I expect to lead anyone else? Whether that's
great
in my family. Certainly wanted to find work again. And so I went back to the tools I had learned and taught in graduate school.
For yourself?
For myself. And instead of leadership in our traditional workplace context, I did it inward and looked at myself as I'm a leader within myself first. I have to lead myself.
I have to lead
first.
all the parts of myself first.
Yes. And for me, that started with values.
Tell us about that, because I've done some work with you, and I know that you are the queen of values. And I love this because we often we think we know maybe what we value, but you are very intentional about helping people get clear on their values as step one, right?
As step one. And it doesn't matter what role you see yourself in, whether that's at home, at work, in your community. We all have an opportunity and an invitation to lead. And we don't often see ourselves as being worthy of those invitations because we don't view ourselves internally as a leader. And for me, the values work connects to the Leadership Challenge framework. The Leadership Challenge is a book and methodology that was written 40 years ago, evidence-based. And authors Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner have been critical supports to me through my life leadership journey, as well as my professional leadership journey. And their first practice is called Model the Way. It is based on 2 commitments. The first is finding your voice by clarifying your values. The second is aligning your behavior with your values.
Mm.
And that truly became my internal pivot because, and we use a deck of cards, a deck of values cards. And so I had found a deck from my graduate school studies and literally led myself through the same activity that I had facilitated for others previously. And once I saw my 5 values literally laid out in front of me, I knew
Something clicked.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to know what your 5 values are.
They've shifted slightly, but the ones that truly are my grounding points are integrity, curiosity, clarity, connection, and love.
Well, and look at the alcohol. You had no clarity.
Correct?
You had no connection.
Absolutely.
You had no integrity.
Right.
What were your other 2? Love.
And
self-love.
No,
self-love.
Zero self-love. I didn't think I was worthy of love, much less love myself. And so using truly those values as my pillars, for me, leadership is a way of life. And part of that is really understanding that what leadership looks like for other people, it's okay that I choose to lead differently.
Beautiful.
So it became okay to proudly proclaim that I'm a sober leader.
Yes.
I'm alcohol free.
Yes.
I'm an Iowa Hawkeye football parent who doesn't drink.
Yes.
And while at the same time understanding that I didn't fit in some of those preconceived definitions, there's this dissonance that as much as I want to fit in, if I try to belong in a way that is inauthentic, I'm not belonging to myself.
Oh, that's so good.
And alcohol is such a way to feel like you belong.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it's a false sense.
It is.
Because
It's inauthentic. Yeah.
People aren't really grounded in their true selves.
Right.
Yeah. Today's episode is supported by Dr. Yoga Mama. This is Dr. Betsy, and if you are interested in working with me in a deeper way, you can check out all the different offerings I have going on. Online courses, retreats around the world, weekly yoga classes, and my monthly Wisdom Wednesday, which is the first Wednesday of each month, where I talk about the intersection of yoga, psychology, mindfulness, and spirituality. You can find all the information at www.dryogamama.com.
This episode is also being sponsored by Kate Moreland Coaching. If you have an interest in transformational coaching, either in an individual or group setting, please reach out to katemorelandcoaching.com. Talk a little bit about your boys. I know how close you are to them.
Yes.
And how was your relationship with them? What have you modeled for them that has really, been a lesson for them? And how's your relationship been?
That is my proudest achievement is my relationship with my boys. And they were in high school when kind of the crap started. And so they literally have seen me at my worst. It was my youngest son who woke me up and literally brought me back to life by waking me up. My mom had called and he answered the phone and came to me. And that's literally what saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has literally seen me, as has my oldest, at my lowest points, coming out of the hospital, going back into the hospital, missing key events in their lives because I was either too hungover or actively drinking and just literally couldn't attend. And so when I became grounded in my values, I knew that my boys had heard me say, I'm sorry, over and over and over. They'd heard me say, I won't do this again. I'm starting over. Please believe me. And like anybody, they knew that the chances were very minimal that I would follow through. So I had to demonstrate integrity by doing what I said I was going to do. Yeah. And that was not drinking. And that was doing the work. And so as I've continued to literally lead by example in how I parent, it has strengthened my relationship with them exponentially and continues to strengthen.
Yeah.
You know, I parent differently and I parent better than I did when I was drinking. Absolutely. And my oldest son, who's now 24, I asked him not that long ago, I said, you know, when I was in really the deep of it, what did you think life would be like? And he literally said, I thought you'd be dead.
Yeah.
And what else is a young man to think when they see their parent, their mom,
So sick.
so
ill.
sick and choosing
Yeah.
not to do anything different?
And this is such a story of also the power of repair
Mm.
because we all are so human and we all have so many struggles. And, you know, you could have thought, well, I've ruined it with my kids,
Right.
right? I put
Yeah.
my kids through hell and I've ruined it with
Yep.
them. And
Yep.
instead, it's like as you know, you got sober, you got clear, you started to find your healing path. You actually have repaired these relationships and given them a really beautiful vision of the fact that you can be human
Yes.
and
Yes.
learn and grow,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So
And it's even in how I communicate. You know, I've taken my own learning in a lot of different ways, whether it's, you know, understanding their values. And we do our values explorations on kind of an annual basis. And what
I
they
love that.
I do too.
yeah,
I do too.
what they value.
Geeking out on values with my kids.
Yep. When they allow me to go there with them. But they understand that what they value and what I value, not only is that different, but it will look different behaviorally. Right. So I value connection. And as a loving, giving, open mom, I want a lot of connection with my kids. Right. But that doesn't necessarily mean they want to talk to me every day.
Right.
Or that they want me to offer to clean their house or offer to take them out for dinner. And so it's taken me a while, but I'm now realizing that that doesn't mean they don't love me.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they're still
Oh, that's so good.
that they're still ashamed of me. But I catch myself, that's like still my default. That, you know, I live in Iowa City, Coralville, as does my youngest. And, you know, if I call him up and say, hey, I'll take you out for dinner tonight, and he'll say, no, I'm doing something with my guys, you know, my default will be he still blames me for his life.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'm getting better at catching myself and being like,
Good for
that's
you, Angie.
nothing to
Yes.
do with me.
No.
You know, that's not him doing his guy thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm getting, again, it's a progress. It's not linear by any means.
Right.
And I'm getting better at catching myself that, you know, my reaction to Jeremy wanting to do stuff with his guys that's my choice.
Yeah.
He's not doing that because of anything about me.
Yeah.
And that's growth.
Yeah. Angie, I wanted to ask, I have a sense that there will be women listening to this that are in all stages of their own struggle with alcohol. Some thinking it's not really a struggle, some
Right.
wondering, is it a struggle?
Yeah.
Some knowing it's a struggle and what to do next. Like you're on the other side.
Mhm.
What do you recommend or what's some wisdom you can share?
Obviously, starting with clarification of one's values is my just general recommendation. I do have some resources on my website at angiechaplin.com. There's an alcohol-free tab, and I list some available resources there that include free programs like Smart Recovery. There are other mindset-oriented programs around recovery and recovering from whatever it is that we need to overcome in life. And so that's a great place to start. I'm accessible on social media. People can find me. I'm very open about my story. And I share publicly because I want people to engage in that self-awareness piece, right? Because awareness comes far before addiction.
Yeah.
And if we try to make it about an addiction problem, we're missing the point.
Oh, that is so good. And when your story of when you're such in the throes of alcohol controlling your life, it just draws you further and further away from yourself.
Right.
So that self-awareness, being able to grasp it, you know, some sort of resource to help you reconnect with yourself, which is what you did.
Right.
But we need to ask for help when we need it too.
We do.
Women are not always great
Yeah.
at saying something's off. I don't know who to go to, what to do.
Yeah. Right.
Because I've always felt like, and just in my work and law, it was such a foundational issue for so many people that had legal trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Right. They would show up and you'd see it showing up in their life and getting in the way of them being productive and being able to find, success in the way that they wanted to. And our culture is just so
supportive of it.
Yes. Keep everybody numbed out. Like it's just
go have some fun.
Yeah.
And it keeps people from their true, I believe sometimes their true purpose, because they just aren't connected to who they are.
Yes.
Keeps them in jobs they don't want to be in.
Right.
Relationships they don't want to choose or aren't healthy for them.
Yeah. And you have found this beautiful path, even though it was very hard, and you're open. Your openness is so admirable. But there is a path forward, and the joy on the other side is what I want you to share. Like the joy you found, the life you have built, the healing, all of that, you're now giving back to others because you are complete.
Yes.
Like
I'll push back on that. And I know you're okay with me pushing back that I'm not yet complete. I'm closer to complete.
I don't think we ever get completed.
No one's ever complete.
No, right. I don't think. I think it's a life journey.
Yeah. And I think part of this, and what kind of initiated some of my deeper thoughts around this was the conversation the two of you had about, ways that you've rewild kind of in your own growth over the course of the podcast. And as I started digging deeper into that, I thought there's so many opportunities in my life that I took pride in my wild behavior. I was outgoing. I was the life of the party. I was going to social events and signing up and all these things. And I thought, I'm so good because look how wild I am. But it for me was the wrong kind of wild. And it wasn't until through my growth and recovery and my mental health journeys that allowed me to be okay with unwilding for a while, so that now I can truly identify myself in a more authentically wild way. And for me, it looks very different. I have been single on purpose for some time now because I understand that relationships should not be taken for granted, and that I am 100% okay being single, and I'm incredibly open for companionship. What that means or what that looks like will be very different from what previous relationships in my life looked like.
You don't need them in the same way.
I don't need them in the same way. And for me, there's a difference between settling and choosing to compromise. Right. I think in the past, I have been way too willing to settle because it was that validation that I sought. And I was willing to ignore the gaslighting or the narcissistic behaviors because I thought that's what I deserved, a person like me with my kind of past. And now it's not okay to put up with that.
Don't you think too, getting clear on your values can also help make sure that whoever's in your inner circle is aligned with your values?
Yes.
So suddenly the relationships you had that were not healthy, they don't align anymore. And so you're waiting or open to ones that will be in alignment with those.
Yeah. And values. I think, part of it before was I counted my success with the number of connections that I had in my network, right? The number of quote friends. Right. Yeah. And now I still count those people as being significant pieces of my life, but now it's so much about deeper connections.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm not as active on social media these days because that isn't
authentic.
No.
Deep and authentic.
No. And so
very surface.
It is. And yet we are becoming ingrained to my value is connected to how many likes I have or how many times my post is forwarded or shared. And I catch myself going down that negative path and purposely have to pull myself back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you're like
that's
on
still
a
part of the
journey
journey.
of authenticity. Like I just
Mhm.
feel throughout all of this, you keep going down one more layer, one more layer.
Yeah.
You keep connecting deeper to yourself,
Yeah.
and your whole life keeps sort of unfolding from a more real place. And
Yes.
don't you think that's in some ways the definition, or what alcohol does is it just
Mhm.
totally disconnects you from any authenticity,
Correct.
but it's
Yes.
covering up, the pain. It's the problem isn't necessarily the alcohol use. It's
Right.
the pain that's underneath it
Yes.
that
It
the alcohol is
masks.
Yes.
masking.
Yep. What's the
And
source?
so you started
Yeah.
to really dig into what's what's the source here? And
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
can I move through it?
And for me, it was the lack of self-love.
Yeah.
That was the hole. That was the
deep
void.
hole that you were always trying to fill.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and you focus so much on your relationship with yourself, right? So
Yes.
being connected to you, which then in turn allows you to more authentically connect to others.
Right.
Because we all know the more connected we are with ourselves, the more we can truly connect with other people.
Yeah.
And so I feel you on the cusp of like, as you say, I'm open to companionship. And there's, you're in a place you really invested in yourself in these last several years. And that will, continue to inform your relationships and what shows up for you and what,
Yeah.
what's there.
It's a
So,
journey, isn't it?
Yes.
It's
Total
a
journey. Yeah.
not a destination.
no.
And what if we all like really invested in ourselves? Like I really think about that. And it does take for so many people the rock bottom.
Yeah.
It takes the diagnosis. It
Yeah.
takes whatever it is to wake us up to like, oh my gosh, I don't have a relationship with myself.
Right.
I better start to establish this. And
Yeah.
like, what if this was something we were all, instead of it being selfish,
Yes.
to
Right.
take time for yourself,
Yeah.
or to choose not to be in a relationship right now
Right.
because you want to take care of yourself.
Yep.
What if we all were trained to see that as so important?
Yeah. Yeah.
And health.
Health.
It's holistic health.
Right.
And to me, that's what the leadership piece demonstrates. It's leading myself holistically. That means mind, body, spirit.
Yeah.
How are they in alignment with my values? So that the way I lead my life when I'm home by myself with my dog, or when I'm out at a social event, or when I'm with my kids, or with other circles that I'm honored to be part of, that I'm not acting differently in front of different people.
Yeah, you're the same
Yes.
way.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
a chameleon.
Yes. And that's such,
Yeah.
I think, a good thing for all of us just to be aware of. Like, how am I different in different situations? And
Right.
because it doesn't ever feel good.
Right.
When we have the mask up and we're like, oh, that
Yeah,
doesn't
that's
feel
icky.
right. Like, how can I show up just like myself in
Yeah.
every situation? I love that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love
And
that.
giving myself permission to, when things start to feel a little bit weird for me, which sometimes the people I'm with are drinking too much or getting too loud and obnoxious, I give myself permission to remove myself from that
Exit.
situation
Mhm.
without blaming them, without shaming them. I'm truly not anti-drinking. I'm pro-awareness.
Mm.
And it's me being aware of how my body is feeling when I'm in those situations that allows me to have permission to establish a boundary and then choose
Yeah.
not to cross it
Right.
by exiting.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
One of the things when you reached out to us and we asked for some information, you shared with us that you have strengths finders,
Mhm.
strengths that you have recognized in yourself prior to being
Yep.
sober and
Yep.
post sober.
Yeah.
Or being sober now. What can you share with that? Because I also think that's part of your authenticity.
Yes.
Suddenly the real strengths can come through.
Yes. And the data point that resonated so deeply with me was that when I took the Strengths Finder in 2016 was the first time, and WOO, which represents winning others over, was my number one strength.
Not like woo woo.
No,
holistic.
no,
Yeah, I think
no.
I would be like, I would be like all
Yes,
about
the
that.
other
Like,
woo.
this is winning others.
Winning others
over.
over. And I carried that like a badge of honor. But for me, it manifested in behaviors like I'm going to do whatever it takes to win you over, whether that means I sacrifice some of my own healthy behaviors
Or your values.
or my, yes, exactly, my values, or, I will say things that might not quite be accurate in order for you to like me. I was all about that. And many ways it would be unhealthy and cause even toxicity in some of my relationships. But as long as I won others over, right,
It was a success.
it was a success. And just as I've continued in my sobriety journey, I've started to acknowledge that I just don't feel the need to force people or manipulate or persuade for them to like me. Of course, I won't lie. It's nice when people do like me, but it's not my job to make them like me.
Yep.
And the harder I try, the more ineffective
and
it is.
Further away from your authentic self you get.
Right.
Because you are becoming a chameleon often when we're trying to win people over. We morph to try to.
Yes, exactly. And I have a friend who is working through the coaching program with Gallup, who now does the strengths work. And so I retook the strengths assessment. My number one is no longer woo. In fact, woo is number 11.
Wow.
It's not even in the top 10. And strengths that are in my top 10 are strategic, activator, maximizer. I think belief is in there. Ideation is in there. Learner is in there.
Which is who you were
as a kid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Little girl reading all the books.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the process of returning to myself and listening to my own voice. Values became the portal to that for me. But the ability to allow that voice to get louder and to get bolder and braver, that's me leaning into my authentic wild, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Talking about it openly on podcasts, going on television and sharing my story. And for me, it's about doing life out loud in that capacity, because I know that my voice represents many others who choose or feel that they must be silent.
Yeah.
Right. So you're doing it now to help others. Yeah.
To help others generate that awareness.
Yeah. Angie, I'm so glad it's like Kate and I keep learning new and bigger dimensions of this wild woman archetype. And I feel like you just brought forward an entire new perspective on it, which is the wild behaviors that we think make us wild, like getting a tattoo or going out drinking or dancing all night. But that might not actually, and if dancing all night feels authentic, okay, then that is.
You rock it. You got it. Yeah.
But it's more of we have to figure out what is authentic wildness, which is usually just our truth.
Yeah.
Versus what the culture has defined as wild.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
We want to know, Kate's got to ask the final question around.
Yeah.
You have it pulled up?
I do.
Uh-oh.
She knows this question.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about your answer.
I am too. So you know that this podcast is based on the book Women Who Run with the Wolves.
Right.
And Clarissa Pinkola Estes shares kind of these portals into the world of the wild woman. So
you've clearly gone through it, Angie.
And many of these may resonate, but we're curious maybe which one really sticks out to you.
Okay.
So if you have a deep, deep scar, that is a door. If you have an old, old story, that is a door. If you love the sky and the water so much you can almost not bear it, that is a door. If you yearn for a full life, a deeper life, a sane life, that is a door. So is there a door that immediately you feel drawn to?
I think the deeper yearning for a true, authentic life is the door that's been opened to me and that I am choosing to bravely walk through. And that isn't perfect and it isn't easy. And it means returning to myself and these conversations over and over and over. And tools and practices like yoga and journaling and so many tools that I used to kind of shun, I now fully embrace and need and embody because it allows me to tune into myself and to listen to my voice in an authentic way.
Well, and on the note of brave, can you share with our listeners your newest endeavor that I have been able to be a little part of and witness, because it's so powerful what you're doing?
Well, and part of this all connects, of course, as it would, right? That when I started my business as an entrepreneur in 2020, I was newly sober, right? I had just moved to the Marion, Cedar Rapids area. Places weren't hiring because it was COVID. And it's like, I guess I'll start a business. But I didn't want to do business the way everybody else was doing business because it felt inauthentic. I didn't want to push sales on to people. I didn't want to be someone that charged my friends for services that I otherwise would have provided for free. So that I just had this cognitive dissonance around that.
Because you were getting more authentic.
Yes.
You couldn't win others over in the same way
exactly. So I struggled with this whole persona of traditional entrepreneur. And last fall, an idea landed of doing entrepreneurship in a different way. And that is as a social entrepreneur. And I have co-founded a nonprofit called Brave Leadership. Kate is one of our gracious, wonderful volunteer board members. And we are dedicated to unlocking leadership potential within health and human services workforce. Because reflecting on my journey, if at any point in the 10 years that I consider my dark decade, if at any point someone had mentioned to me connecting with your authentic self or things like values, or had initiated a conversation around self-empowerment or self-leadership, I'm certain it would not have taken me 10 years and multiple hospitalizations to reach that point, that turning point. So by equipping leaders who work in mental health and behavioral health
and are often burned out.
Yes, and are often burned out and not the best at caring for themselves, by equipping those leaders with self-empowered leadership skills, they then empower others. So we're leading leaders who then create ripples of positive change in the clients and communities that they serve. So Brave Leadership is an emerging 501c3. We have been incorporated and have submitted our official application as a nonprofit. That takes a few months because the government, the government. And so we are off and running. We'll be launching events this summer that will be designed and held exclusively for the nonprofit workforce, and truly engaging in social entrepreneurship by creating organizational wealth. And that being the priority in building a large, potentially national nonprofit organization to be the premier nonprofit leadership provider in the country.
It's beautiful.
That's the vision.
Yes.
Yay. The vision.
Inspiring. Yeah.
The vision.
And I have witnessed a little piece of this for you and how everything has come together around this.
Yeah. It feels very
authentic to you. Your passion, like your experience, all of that is woven into this vision.
Yeah.
And it's also a very feminine way to do entrepreneurship, which
we need
more of, right?
Yeah.
Compassion and collaboration.
Right.
All of those feminine traits.
And care, like caring for people doing this hard work.
Yes. And it's acknowledging that it's bigger than me. It's bigger than my message. It's bigger than my story. It's the collaboration and the connection of all the stories of our board members and people who will eventually join our organization and the clients and communities and organizations we're serving. It's really that story of collaboration and connection and community that allows us to really live an authentic, wholehearted life.
Yep. Beautiful. And you have been brave, and you are now holding space for others to be brave.
Yes, I'm
So,
working on that with
Beautiful.
myself and with others.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So tell us where people can find more about you.
Yes, my website, angiechaplin.com, lists some of the, again, the alcohol-free resources are there. Some of the background work that I do with the Leadership Challenge. I have been a regular guest on WHO TV in Des Moines, and so we have all the media clips that are available there. I have a YouTube channel that features some snippets of different news stories, as well as guided meditations and other offerings in that space. Braveleadership.org is the website for the nonprofit. We would love philanthropic partners to help us launch in a very impactful way. So donors and sponsors and supporters are able to learn a little bit more, and then certainly consider how they would like to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
Because it really is about sparking solutions and optimizing outcomes for people who work in health and human services, because that's what they're dedicated to doing for their clients.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
My
and
pleasure,
for being
my honor.
so raw and authentic.
Thank
It's
you.
beautiful.
It was a gift to everyone.
Appreciate both of you very much.
Thank you.